Communication really is key to a lot of things. And, one of those is conflict. We've talked about what the different types of conflicts are, and we talked about communication style. Communication, while it helps with conflict, it can also initiate it. And so in this context, we're going to discuss communication for telecommuters. What conflict is for telecommuters is three different things. It's time, it's environmental, and it's work-family. So what is work-family? Imagine you have time in the morning where you're with your family and something happens and you carry that into your day. And so that is a work-family conflict, or vice versa. It could be something that happened during the day that carries into your evening time with your family. And with telecommuting, those are one and the same. You're at home, you never leave, and so those boundaries are often crossed, and that's where conflict usually comes into play. Environmental is a little bit easier concept to understand. You have dogs barking in the background, perhaps your room isn't comfortable, maybe it's too cold, maybe you're in a very small environment, or somebody's outside blowing the leaves. You can't tell them to stop. You can't stop the environment. You can't stop the cold from coming in. You can change it. You can cope. You can move into a different room, put on a blanket or something. But those are conflicts that'll happen environmentally. And then the last one is time conflict. So time conflict is a little bit interesting because when you think about telecommuting, usually time conflict is the opposite. But studies have shown even that time conflict is usually reduced whenever they're telecommuting. But we're at a time where we're at home all day long. We're thinking about this new remote work environment, not necessarily just hybrid, but literally there all day long. And what studies have shown is when you get to that amount of point, there's that boundary again that's crossed. And there was a study one time on by a guy named Marlo Tang. And what he found was that in global teams where there were asynchronous communication, so usually that's ones that you get a message and they get a message back. Think about text message or emails. That's asynchronous communication. They were asynchronous and their teams were working fine. And then all of a sudden, because of this pandemic, new technology came out, they became synchronous. So they tried to have like a 6 a.m. or a 7 a.m. call where it would be 10 p.m. in overseas and it would be 6 a.m. Central Time or something like that. And it caused conflict. It's not only the time conflict, but there were other conflicts. Work-family created conflicts. People were a little bit more agitated. They didn't want to get on the video, but they had to. And those are things that happen with that. So today I wanted to really talk about those two different things. One is, what does time conflict look like? And how do mediums affect that? And the other one is disputes. And again, how do mediums affect that? So in terms of digital communication, how you manage conflict, and conflict in the terms of a dispute, sometimes talking it out works. We see where people say, okay, we'll get in a room and talk it out. Come to an understanding. And that's very different than what we're experiencing today via virtual platforms. We can talk it out, but oftentimes you don't get to that point because the medium is a little bit different where you have a set time and you can't really feel out the other person. And oftentimes, just getting in that room, the spark is there again. And sometimes the dispute even happens there. And so what was found was high synchronous communication, oftentimes when you're separated, doesn't work as well as low synchronous communication. So what that means is write an email instead. And why? Because when you write an email, you have time to think. You have time to cool down. You have time to gather your thoughts, and you can write it down in a form that is really digestible and that the other person can really understand. The next part is talking about, okay, so what is time conflict? And in this case, time conflict often comes with psychological distance. How do I feel as it relates to you? The message that's being delivered. Is it relative to me? And that's what the psychological distance is. It's how distant is what you're delivering from what I'm gaining from this. And also the distance in time where people are saying, okay, well, does this matter to me tomorrow? Does this matter to me next week? Or does it ever even matter to me? And so when you think about psychological distance, it's who is delivering that message to the person that's receiving the message of the audience. For CEOs, that's very separated. CEOs could be like 3-4 layers up. That needs to be vision, that needs to be value. And so what they're delivering to you is usually down the road. This is what we're going to expect to achieve next quarter. This is what we're going to expect to achieve this coming year. And think about if you have a manager and they're having a team meeting with you, what does that look like? That looks like, okay, well, I need these objectives and I need these results by tomorrow. I need it a little bit down the road, but no more than a month. And so that is the psychological distance, the difference between a CEO talking to you and your direct manager talking to you. That may be one and the same, but that's what we're talking about when we're talking about psychological distance. And that brings relativity to it. And why is that important? It's because in our study, we found that relativity has to do with conflict and burnout. If you're not relatable to the person, you have a time conflict that occurs. And when you have those time conflicts, you just feel like you're spinning in circles and you end up feeling burnt out. Versus if you're talking directly to your manager and they're giving you exactly what they need to do, they lay it out well. It doesn't mean don't be creative with how you do your things, but it is that I need to know what I'm doing. I'm not looking for a vision. I'm literally looking for things that I need to work on. And so I can create those, and there's no time conflict in that meeting. That meeting is helping guide you. So in concluding, there is a difference in how you communicate with people, what medium you use, how you deliver that message. And so just be mindful of your audience and make sure to think about it and how you can minimize those conflicts and the way you deliver those messages.